For too long, Washington has been dominated by career politicians who have entrenched themselves in power, serving decade after decade while becoming increasingly disconnected from the people they claim to represent. It's time to restore accountability, fresh ideas, and true representation in Congress by implementing term limits. One of the fundamental principles of our republic is that elected officials serve the people, not themselves. However, many members of Congress have turned public service into a lifelong career, prioritizing their personal power and special interest connections over the needs of their constituents. Politicians who remain in office for decades often lose touch with the struggles of everyday Americans instead of becoming beholden to lobbyists and the entrenched political establishment. The Founding Fathers never intended for Congress to be a permanent class of elites. George Washington himself set the precedent for term limits by stepping down after 2 terms as president, understanding that a rotation in leadership was essential, preventing tyranny and corruption. Yet today we see senators and representatives serving for 30, 40, or even 50 years, amassing power and influence while accountability erodes. The consequences of this entrenched system are clear. Career politicians prioritize re-election over principled leadership, making decisions based on political survival rather than what is best for the country. The longer they stay in office, the more they rely on massive campaign war chests funded by special interests, further insulating themselves from the voters. Meanwhile, new voices and fresh perspectives are shut out, leaving Congress stagnant and resistant to change. The recent falls of both former Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and former Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi serve as a stark reminder that many of our nation's top legislators have remained in power well beyond their physical and cognitive peaks. McConnell, who has suffered multiple public health scares, and Pelosi, who has faced similar concerns, highlight the dangers of a system that allows individuals to serve indefinitely without serious scrutiny of their ability to perform the job. Their continued presence in leadership roles, despite visible signs of aging and declining health, raises critical questions about whether term limits should be imposed to ensure that our leaders are capable of handling the immense responsibilities of governing.
There are concerns for the health and well-being of 82-year-old former Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell after he reportedly had 2 separate falls in the Senate and was filmed being escorted by an aide in a wheelchair. The latest falls come after a concerning amount of injuries and bizarre behaviour by McConnell. He has experienced falls, bizarre freezing episodes.
Did you hear the question, Senator? Running for re-election in 2026? All right, I'm sorry, you all. We're going to need a minute. Senator Benny. Yep.
Okay.
Somebody else have a question? Please speak up.
Mumbled speech and more freezing.
And a string of
Are you good?
Okay, Mitch. Anything else you want to say, or should we just go back to your press? Do you want to say anything else to the press?
Go ahead, John.
I'll take it. Let's go back to you.
Go ahead, John.
And he also took a tumble recently, injuring his arm. Online commentators reacted to the incidents, suggesting McConnell is too old to be in Congress. This commentator said, Senator McConnell spotted in a wheelchair after falling not once but twice today. He's 82 years old. We need term limits now. This commentator agreed, saying Senator Mitch McConnell needs to resign. He is old, cognitively impaired, and now physically falling. Resign, seek medical attention, get well, and live out the rest of your life at home. The Capitol is not a geriatric retirement facility on the taxpayer's dime. Mitch McConnell is not the first member of Congress to be called out for his age. Joe Biden's age and cognitive decline was what ultimately ended his time in politics after countless stumbles and mumbles. And 84-year-old Nancy Pelosi is also being urged to retire, with footage of her struggling to easily walk around the Capitol, even forced to use a Zimmer frame recently at Trump's election certification.
The cases of Representative Kay Granger and Senator Dianne Feinstein further exemplify the urgent need for term limits. Both showed visible signs of cognitive decline while still holding office. Feinstein died in office at age 90, and who can forget her learning that she wasn't running for re-election from a staff member? Similarly, Granger was in a memory care facility while still holding office.
Senator Dianne Feinstein will retire from Congress when her term is up in 2024. After 3 decades, the California Democrat made the announcement yesterday.
There appeared to be some confusion surrounding her retirement, however. Specifically, Feinstein herself seemed unaware that the statement announcing it, that she would not seek re-election, had already been released. Here's the audio, which is very confusing. Listen for yourself.
Re-election.
Well, I haven't made that decision. I haven't released anything. It will be my plan. You put out the statement?
Yeah, we put out your statement.
I didn't know they put it out.
Okay.
So it is what it is. I think the time has come. I have a whole other year. I have things that are underway. I expect to achieve them. I hope.
Yeah.
And so we'll see.
Senator, when did you make your decision? I know you said it was going to take you some time.
Senator, we need to catch the train.
Yeah. Well, my husband has died, and that affected the decision.
Nope.
And I think
Can you make it this week?
It's not the end of next year.
A Republican congresswoman has been missing from public life for 6 months, and we've now learned that she's living in a dementia care facility. Oh, dear God. Now, I want to be clear. This is not a story about making fun of cognitive decline. It's not a story meant to mock people for dealing with illness. The point here is there's a very important conversation to be had. Our political system has a serious problem, and it's called gerontocracy, a system dominated by people who are, in many cases, no longer capable of serving effectively.
These examples highlight the broader issue of aging politicians remaining in office despite evident declines in their mental acuity. The inability of Congress to self-regulate these situations reinforces the necessity of term limits, ensuring that lawmakers are fully capable of making crucial decisions that impact the nation. Term limits would break this cycle and reinvigorate our legislative process. By ensuring that members of Congress serve for a limited time, we would encourage more citizen legislators, that is, leaders who bring real-world experience into politics. This would lead to greater accountability as lawmakers would focus on making meaningful policy changes rather than perpetuating their own careers. Now, critics argue that elections serve as natural term limits, allowing voters to remove ineffective legislators. But in reality, incumbents have overwhelming advantages, from name recognition to fundraising networks, making it nearly impossible for challengers to compete fairly. A system that allows politicians to hold office for decades does not reflect the will of the people. It reflects a broken system designed to protect those in power. Enacting term limits is not a partisan issue. It's a common-sense reform that would benefit all Americans. It would reduce corruption, foster new ideas, and ensure that government remains accountable to the people. If we truly believe in a government of, by, and for the people, then it's time to demand term limits and put an end to the era of career politicians. Watch the following clip and please share your thoughts in the comments.
The new Congress has just started, but an age-old issue is taking center stage: term limits for lawmakers. The issue is being backed by some GOP members and even President-elect Donald Trump, and it's gaining momentum. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales has that story.
Good evening, Tracy. 90% of Americans support term limits for lawmakers in Congress, but right now there are no limits and never have been. Now a push is being made by some GOP lawmakers. They tell me that age and illness play a part, but they also add that many lawmakers are out for themselves instead of serving the American people. South Carolina Congressman Ralph Norman is leading the effort in the House.
6 years in the House is fine. 2 terms in the Senate is fine. The fact that the pushback is coming from those who just want to come up here and live on the government. That's just not right. That's not how the framers intended it.
While Florida Senator Rick Scott is leading the effort in the upper chamber.
But we ought to make sure that we're getting new people, new ideas. You would know if you're up here and you're up here for 12 years, you know, sometime in your 12 years, you're going to get your stuff done and you have a limited time. So I believe in it. We have term limits for presidents, for most governors, so it works.
Supporters say these pictures tell the story. Lawmakers being wheeled around while others using walkers after falls, or those absent from Congress altogether, like now retired Congresswoman Kay Granger, who is spending her days in an assisted living facility. Nick Tomboulides is the CEO of U.S. Term Limits and is lobbying to change the Constitution.
Term limits is the way to just open up these elections, get open seats on a regular basis, and what you see is a huge influx of new candidates, new energy, new ideas. We have elections, but obviously the deck is stacked.
Those against limiting lawmakers' terms say the voters already decide.
We live every 2 years by term limits. If the people in the 33rd Congressional District in California choose for me not to be their representative, I will move on. I have limits. The voters decide that.
Lawmakers are optimistic that this may finally be the time to get term limits in place, but it will be a heavy lift. Even if 2/3 of Congress approves the constitutional amendment, 3/4 of the states must also pass it.